The growling erupted from 12 throats simultaneously. Master Chief Brick stumbled backward, his hand instinctively reaching for the sidearm on his hip. In 17 years, serving with the Navy SEALs, he had never witnessed anything quite like this. 12 military working dogs, Belgian Malinois and German Shepherds, lay in a perfect circle around the flag-draped casket. Not a single one moved. Not a single one obeyed commands. "Get them out of there!" Lieutenant Commander Cyrus shouted, his voice cracking with frustration. "The memorial service starts in 2 hours." Petty Officer First Class Fletcher, the highest-rated handler on base, stepped forward with practiced confidence. The lead dog, a jet-black Malinois named Phantom, bared its fangs. Fletcher retreated immediately, his face draining of color. They won't listen to anyone, sir." Brick turned his attention to the woman standing in the corner of the room, a small janitor clutching a mop, her eyes cast downward. She was here again. "Hey, civilian," Brick barked. "I already told you once. Restricted area. Get out. Now." The woman, her name tag read Amber, nodded slightly and backed toward the door. But as she moved, something strange happened. Phantom, the most aggressive dog in the pack, lifted its head. Its nose twitched almost imperceptibly. Its tail wagged once, just once. Then it lay back down and continued its vigil. No one noticed, no one except Amber. She paused at the threshold, her eyes fixed on the casket, where the body of Chief Petty Officer Caleb rested, the husband she still was not permitted to mourn. But in the next 20 minutes, everyone in this room would understand exactly how wrong they had been. The door clicked shut behind her, and Brick turned his attention back to the impossible situation before him. 12 of the most highly trained military working dogs in the entire Special Operations Command had formed an impenetrable barrier around their fallen handler's remains. Every approach had failed. Every command had been ignored. "This is getting out of hand," Cyrus muttered, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling command. We need specialists from Pendleton." "Pendleton?" Fletcher scoffed, still nursing his pride from the rejection. "With all due respect, sir, if I can't get through to them, what makes you think anyone from Pendleton can?" Brick shot him a look that could freeze fire. "Because clearly, Petty Officer, your methods aren't working, unless you have a better idea." Fletcher's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Outside the building, Amber moved through the shadows with a fluidity that seemed almost unnatural for someone in her position. Her footsteps made no sound on the concrete. Her body stayed low, hugging the walls, moving from cover to cover as if by instinct rather than conscious thought. She stopped at the corner of the kennel building, pressing her back against the cold metal siding. From here, she could see through the window, could watch as Brick and his team argued about what to do next. Her hand trembled slightly as she gripped the mop handle, not from fear, from restraint. 3 months. 3 months of mopping floors and cleaning toilets and being invisible. 3 months of watching these men walk past her like she was furniture. 3 months of biting her tongue while they joked about the little cleaning lady who probably couldn't tell a rifle from a broomstick. And now, Caleb was home, in a box, draped in the flag he had sworn to defend. She closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe. Not yet. The time would come, but not yet. Inside the building, Cyrus ended his call with a grimace. "Specialists from Pendleton can't get here for another 6 hours. Something about a training exercise they can't interrupt." 6 hours? Brick exploded. "The memorial is in 2. The Admiral is flying in personally. We can't have the casket surrounded by a pack of snarling dogs when she arrives." "Then what do you suggest, Master Chief?" Cyrus challenged. "Because I'm open to ideas." Before Brick could respond, the door opened and Dr. Hazel walked in, the base veterinarian, a woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes and steady hands. She carried a medical bag and wore an expression of professional concern. "I came as soon as I heard," she said, surveying the scene. "Any changes?" "None," Fletcher replied bitterly. "They won't eat, they won't move, they just sit there, staring at the casket." Hazel approached cautiously, staying well outside the invisible perimeter the dogs had established. Phantom tracked her movement but didn't growl, a small mercy. "They're not injured," she observed after a careful visual examination. "No signs of trauma or distress. Their breathing is normal, heart rates appear stable." She paused, tilting her head as she studied the formation. "They're waiting." "Waiting?" Brick repeated. "Waiting for what?" Dr. Hazel shook her head slowly. "Not what. Who? These dogs are waiting for someone specific to arrive. Cyrus exchanged a glance with Brick. Their handler is dead, Doctor. Chief Petty Officer Caleb died 3 days ago in Syria. There's no one left for them to wait for. Something flickered across Dr. Hazel's face. A shadow of doubt, perhaps, or a question she wasn't sure how to ask. But she simply nodded and stepped back. I'll stay nearby in case anything changes, but I don't think sedation is advisable at this point. Whatever they're experiencing, it seems almost sacred. Sacred? Brick snorted. They're animals, Doctor. Well-trained ones, I'll give you that. But animals nonetheless. They don't understand death. They don't understand ceremony. They're just confused. Dr. Hazel met his eyes with a quiet intensity that made him uncomfortable. Are they, Master Chief? Or are we the ones who are confused? Before he could formulate a response, the door burst open again, and Specialist Derek rushed in, slightly out of breath. Sir, we have a problem. Media vans are gathering at the main gate. Somehow word got out about the dogs refusing to leave the casket. It's already trending on social media. Cyrus pinched the bridge of his nose. Of course it is. Because today wasn't complicated enough. Derek moved closer, his eyes darting around the room with an energy that seemed excessive for the situation. Maybe we should consider sedating them, sir, just temporarily, long enough to move them to the kennels and get the memorial started on time. Absolutely not. The voice came from the doorway, where Senior Chief Silas stood with his arms crossed. He was older than the others, with silver threading through his close-cropped hair and deep lines around his eyes that spoke of decades in service. Caleb would never have wanted that. These dogs were his life. You don't drug his family just because they're inconveniencing your schedule. Derek's face reddened. With all due respect, Senior Chief, the Admiral is coming. The press is watching. We need to handle this situation before it becomes an embarrassment for the entire command. Silas stepped into the room, his presence commanding despite his lack of formal authority over the situation. An embarrassment? Those dogs carried classified intelligence across enemy lines. They've saved more American lives than anyone in this room can count. They're honoring their fallen leader the only way they know how, and you want to talk about embarrassment? The tension in the room thickened until it was almost palpable. Brick looked from Silas to Derek to Cyrus, trying to calculate the political calculus of his next move. Outside the window, unseen by everyone inside, Amber watched the confrontation unfold. Her eyes lingered on Silas, the one man in the room who seemed to understand. The one man who had served alongside Caleb in the early days, before the promotions and the medals and the secrets that came with both. She watched as Silas's gaze drifted toward the window, and for a fraction of a second, she thought he might have seen her, but then he turned away, refocusing on the argument at hand, and she released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the Virginia Beach compound. In the kennel building, the standoff continued. In the media vans outside the gate, cameras rolled, and in the shadows between buildings, a woman who was more than she appeared waited for her moment. Before we continue with what happens next, I want to take a moment to thank our amazing subscribers. If you're new here and enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss another incredible military story. We post new content every week featuring the brave men and women who serve. Now, let's get back to what happened when those 12 dogs refused to leave their fallen handler. The impasse stretched into its second hour. Brick had tried everything he could think of: hand signals, verbal commands, even the specialized whistle patterns that were supposed to override all other training. Nothing worked. The dogs remained motionless around the casket, their eyes never wavering from their vigil. Fletcher had retreated to the corner, nursing a bruised ego along with the bite mark on his reinforced glove. Cyrus paced near the door, fielding increasingly frantic calls from command, and Derek hovered near the edges of the scene, his phone pressed to his ear in hushed conversations that always seemed to end whenever anyone drew near. Silas noticed. He didn't say anything, but he noticed. What exactly was Chief Petty Officer Caleb's specialty? Dr. Hazel asked, breaking a long silence. She had positioned herself near a filing cabinet, reviewing medical records for the dogs. I've seen strong handler dog bonds before, but nothing like this. Classified, Brick replied curtly. Of course it is. She flipped another page. But whatever he did, he clearly meant something extraordinary to these animals. Dogs don't behave like this for just any handler. This level of devotion, it's almost human. He was the best, Silas said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Caleb was the best handler I've ever served with. Maybe the best the program has ever produced. He had a gift, a way of communicating with them that went beyond training, beyond commands. His voice caught slightly. They weren't just his dogs, they were his family. The weight of his words settled over the room. Even Brick, for all his gruffness, seemed momentarily moved. The moment shattered when the door opened and Amber walked in, pushing a cleaning cart loaded with supplies. She kept her head down, her movements quiet and unobtrusive as she began collecting trash from the waste bins near the entrance. Brick's face darkened. "What is it with you? How many times do I have to tell you this is a restricted area?" "I'm sorry, sir," Amber murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "The duty roster said to clean this building by 0900. I didn't realize. The duty roster doesn't supersede security protocols, civilian." Brick took a step toward her, and something in his posture made everyone in the room tense. "I don't know what your game is, but I've seen you lurking around here too many times for it to be coincidence. Who are you, really? Who sent you?" Amber's hand stilled on the trash bag she was holding. For a brief moment, so brief that anyone watching might have imagined it, something flickered in her eyes, something sharp and dangerous that didn't match her submissive posture. Then it was gone, replaced by the mask of the invisible worker. "I'm no one, sir," she said softly, "just the cleaning lady." "Brick!" Silas's voice cut through the tension. "Leave her alone. She's just doing her job." Her job doesn't include being in restricted areas during a security situation, but Brick stepped back, redirecting his frustration. "Fine. Finish your trash collection and get out. And I don't want to see you in this building again until the memorial is over. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Amber moved quickly and efficiently, emptying the remaining bins and loading the bags onto her cart. As she passed the window nearest the dogs, something unexpected happened. Luna, the smallest of the 12, a German shepherd with unusual amber eyes, lifted her head and looked directly at Amber. Her tail, which had been motionless for hours, gave a single, almost imperceptible wag beneath her body. No one saw it except Dr. Hazel, who frowned slightly but said nothing. Amber paused for the briefest of moments, her back to the room. Her hand tightened on the cart handle until her knuckles went white. Then she continued toward the door, pushing her cleaning supplies into the hallway and out of sight. In the silence that followed her departure, Phantom shifted slightly. It was the first movement any of the dogs had made in over an hour. He turned his massive head toward the door Amber had just exited. His ears pricked forward as if listening for something only he could hear. Then he settled back into position, and the vigil continued. Cyrus's phone rang again. He answered it with a weariness that suggested he already knew what was coming. "Yes, Admiral. I understand, Admiral. We're doing everything we can, Admiral." A long pause. "She's on her way here personally. Yes, ma'am. We'll be ready." He ended the call and turned to face the room with the expression of a man who had just been told his execution date. "Admiral Fiona is en route. She'll be here within the hour, and she expects this situation to be resolved before the memorial begins." "How exactly are we supposed to accomplish that?" Fletcher demanded. "We've tried everything." "Then try something we haven't tried." Cyrus grabbed his cover and headed for the door. "I need to brief the security detail. Brick, you're in charge here. Make it happen." The door slammed behind him, leaving Brick alone with a room full of anxious personnel and 12 uncooperative dogs. Silas moved to the window, staring out at the compound. In the distance, he could see the cleaning cart being pushed toward the mess hall, the small figure behind it almost disappearing in the morning glare. Something about the way she moved bothered him. It was too smooth, too practiced. Like every step was calculated for maximum efficiency and minimum visibility. He had seen that kind of movement before, in operators, in professionals trained to blend into any environment and emerge only when they chose to be seen. But that was ridiculous. She was just a janitor. Her background check would have flagged anything unusual, wouldn't it? His thoughts were interrupted by Derek, who had sidled up beside him with a conspiratorial air. "Senior Chief, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" "Speak." Derek glanced around, lowering his voice. "Don't you think it's strange? That woman keeps showing up in restricted areas, always at the wrong time, always watching." He leaned closer. "What if she did something to the dogs? Poisoned them or drugged them somehow? It would explain why they're acting so weird." Silas turned to face him fully, his expression unreadable. You think a 100-pound cleaning lady somehow managed to drug 12 highly trained military working dogs without anyone noticing? Dogs that would attack any stranger who got within 10 feet of them? I'm just saying, Senior Chief, it's suspicious. A lot of things are suspicious, Specialist. Silas's eyes held Derek's for a long, uncomfortable moment. The question is, which suspicions are worth pursuing, and which ones are just distractions? Before Derek could respond, Silas walked away, leaving the younger man standing alone by the window with a look of frustration and something else. Something that, if Silas had been watching more closely, he might have recognized as fear. The clock on the wall ticked toward 09:30. Outside, the media presence grew. Inside, the dogs maintained their silent vigil. And somewhere in the maze of buildings that made up Naval Amphibious Base Little Creek, Amber emptied trash cans and mopped floors and waited, just as she had waited for 3 months, just as she would wait a little longer. The hour passed in a haze of failed attempts and mounting pressure. Brick had ordered Fletcher to try one more time, and the result had been predictably disastrous. Reaper, a battle-scarred Malinois with 3 confirmed enemy kills to his name, had lunged at the handler with enough force to knock him off his feet. Only the intervention of Odin, who had grabbed Reaper's collar in his jaws and held him back, prevented serious injury. "That's it," Fletcher gasped, scrambling backward on his hands and knees. "I'm done. I'm not getting killed trying to move a bunch of grief-stricken dogs." Even Brick couldn't argue with that logic. He stood at the edge of the room, arms crossed, mind racing through options that were rapidly dwindling to 0. At precisely 1000 hours, the door opened and Master Sergeant Raymond walked in. He was a compact man with the weathered features of someone who had spent decades in the field, and his chest bore enough ribbons to wallpaper a small room. Behind him came 2 junior handlers, both carrying specialized equipment. Command said you needed experts. Raymond surveyed the scene with professional detachment. 20 years in the military working dog program. I've seen everything from combat trauma to handler transitions. This? He gestured at the circle of dogs. This I've never seen. Brick felt a flicker of hope. Can you fix it? Let's find out. Raymond spent the next 20 minutes observing, taking notes, and occasionally murmuring commands in a voice too low for anyone else to hear. He approached from different angles, testing reactions. He tried food rewards, toy stimuli, even a recorded voice sample from Caleb's training sessions. Nothing worked. Finally, he stepped back, shaking his head slowly. They're not responding to any standard protocol. It's like they've entered some kind of protective fugue state. They know their handler is gone, and they've decided to guard his body until... He trailed off, uncertain. Until what? Brick demanded. Raymond met his eyes with a strange expression. Until whoever they're waiting for arrives. Everyone they could possibly be waiting for is already here, Brick exploded. Their handler is dead. There's no one else. Then I can't help you. Raymond gathered his equipment and signaled his team toward the door. My professional recommendation is to leave them alone. Eventually, exhaustion and hunger will force them to break. But forcing the issue now, you'll end up with injured personnel and traumatized dogs. Neither outcome is worth the risk. He was halfway out the door when Odin, the largest of the 12, a German shepherd who weighed close to 100 pounds, stood up. Everyone froze. Odin walked slowly toward Raymond, his gait measured and deliberate. The master sergeant held his ground, years of training overriding the instinct to flee. When the dog was close enough to touch, it stopped and sniffed the air. Then it turned its massive head toward the window, toward the figure standing just outside, partially obscured by the morning shadows. Amber. She was watching through the glass, her face expressionless. In her hand, she held a spray bottle and a rag, the tools of her invisible trade. But her eyes weren't on the cleaning supplies. They were locked on Odin. The dog's tail wagged. Once, twice. Then it returned to its position in the circle and lay down. What was that about? Raymond muttered, following Odin's gaze to the window. But Amber was already gone, having melted back into the shadows with the efficiency of smoke in the wind. The janitor, Brick growled. She's been lurking around all morning. I've told her 3 times to stay out of restricted areas. Raymond's brow furrowed. Janitor, you have civilian cleaning staff with access to MWD facilities? She's cleared for basic maintenance. Background check came back clean. 3 months on staff with no issues until... Brick paused, a new thought forming. Until today. Interesting. Raymond glanced at the window one more time, then shrugged and continued toward the door. Whatever's happening here, Master Chief, it's beyond my expertise. Good luck. The door closed behind him, and Brick was left with fewer options and less time than before. At 10:45, the convoy arrived. 3 black SUVs rolled through the main gate, flags flying from the lead vehicle. Security personnel snapped to attention. Media cameras swiveled to capture the moment. And inside the kennel building, every uniformed member unconsciously straightened their posture. Admiral Fiona stepped out of the center vehicle with the practiced grace of someone who had spent a lifetime commanding respect. She was a tall woman in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a regulation bun and eyes that missed nothing. Her uniform bore 4 stars on each shoulder, the weight of an entire fleet distilled into metal and cloth. Cyrus met her at the entrance, saluting crisply. "Admiral, welcome to Little Creek. I apologize for the circumstances, but—" "Save it, Commander." Her voice was crisp, but not unkind. "Brief me on the situation." As they walked toward the building where the standoff continued, Cyrus outlined everything that had happened since the previous evening. The dogs' initial resistance, the failed attempts to move them, the arrival and departure of the Pendleton specialists, the media attention that threatened to turn a private tragedy into a public spectacle. Fiona listened without interruption, her expression revealing nothing. When they reached the building, she paused at the door. "Everyone except Senior Chief Silas, Master Chief Brick, and Dr. Hazel. Clear the room. I want to assess this privately." The order was obeyed without question. Within 30 seconds, only the designated personnel remained, along with the 12 dogs who had not moved since their circle had formed. Fiona walked slowly around the perimeter, studying each dog in turn. She paused longest at Phantom, whose dark eyes tracked her movement with an intelligence that seemed almost human. "These are Ghost Unit dogs," she said finally. It wasn't a question. Brick blinked. "Ma'am?" "Ghost Unit, the unofficial designation for our highest value canine assets. Dogs trained for missions that never officially happened in places that don't officially exist." Her voice carried a weight of knowledge that made the others uncomfortable. Chief Petty Officer Caleb wasn't just their handler, he was their father. He raised most of them from puppies. "We're aware of his service record, Admiral," Silas said carefully, "but we still don't understand why they won't let anyone near the casket." Fiona turned to face him, and something in her expression shifted. A crack in the Admiral's mask that revealed something more personal beneath. "They're waiting, Senior Chief, just as the other specialists said. The question is, who are they waiting for?" She walked to the window and stared out at the compound. Her eyes swept across the buildings, the pathways, the distant figures moving through their daily routines. Then she stopped. Her gaze had locked onto something, someone, near the mess hall entrance. A small figure pushing a cleaning cart. A woman with brown hair and unremarkable features and a name tag that read Amber. "Commander Cyrus," Fiona said quietly, not turning from the window. "Yes, Admiral? I want a complete personnel file on every civilian contractor who has accessed this facility in the past 6 months. Specifically, I want to know everything about your janitorial staff." Cyrus frowned. "Is there something specific I should be looking for, ma'am?" Fiona watched as Amber disappeared into the mess hall, becoming invisible once more. "Just get me the files, all of them, and do it quietly." Brick and Silas exchanged glances but said nothing. The Admiral clearly knew something they didn't, something she wasn't ready to share. Outside, the morning continued its relentless march toward noon. The memorial was scheduled for 1,300 hours. Less than 3 hours remained to resolve a situation that had already defeated every expert they had summoned. And somewhere in the mess hall, a woman who wasn't quite a janitor emptied trash cans and wiped down tables and waited for the moment that would change everything. The noon hour arrived without resolution. Brick had retreated to the far corner of the room, exhausted from hours of failed attempts and mounting frustration. Fletcher sat slumped in a chair near the door, alternating between checking his phone and casting resentful glances at the dogs who had made him look foolish. Derek hovered near Cyrus, offering suggestions that grew increasingly desperate as time ran short. Only Silas remained calm. He stood by the window where the Admiral had stood earlier, watching the compound with an expression of quiet contemplation. "Something's not right," he murmured, half to himself. Dr. Hazel looked up from her notes. "What do you mean?" "Caleb and I served together for 6 years before he moved to the Ghost Unit. We stayed in touch. Birthday cards, Christmas messages, the occasional beer when our rotations aligned." Silas's brow furrowed. He mentioned her once, just once, said he had met someone who understood the work in a way no one else could. Someone who spoke the same language, literally and figuratively. Met someone, a girlfriend? More than that, a partner. Silas turned from the window, but when I asked about her later, he changed the subject. Said some things were classified even between friends. Hazel's medical training kicked in, searching for relevant details. Do you think this partner might be the person the dogs are waiting for? I don't know, but Caleb was a man who kept his secrets close. And those dogs? He gestured at the circle. They were trained to follow commands from exactly 2 people. Caleb was one. The question is, who was the other? Before anyone could respond, the door opened and Admiral Fiona returned. Behind her, Cyrus carried a tablet loaded with personnel files. His face had gone pale. Clear the room, Fiona ordered. Everyone except Senior Chief Silas, now. This story is getting intense, isn't it? If you're on the edge of your seat right now, smash that like button and drop a comment telling us what you think Amber's secret really is. Your engagement helps us bring more stories like this to life. Also, share this video with someone who loves military dogs. They need to see what happens next. Trust me, you won't believe the reveal. The door closed behind the last departing officer, leaving only Fiona, Silas, and the 12 silent guardians. Senior Chief, Fiona began, her voice dropping to a register that demanded absolute attention. What I'm about to tell you is classified at a level that technically doesn't exist. If you repeat it to anyone without authorization, you'll spend the rest of your career counting penguins in Antarctica. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. She handed him the tablet. On the screen was a personnel file. Bare bones, clearly manufactured to withstand casual scrutiny but lacking the depth that should accompany a genuine background check. Amber, no last name on record. Hired 3 months ago as janitorial staff. Background check cleared through standard channels. No flags, no concerns. Fiona paused. Except that her fingerprints match no database in existence. Her face triggers no recognition in any system. And the social security number she provided belongs to a woman who died in a car accident in Wyoming 19 years ago. Silas stared at the file, pieces clicking into place. She's a ghost. Literally. Codename Whisper, Senior Handler, Ghost Unit 7, CIA and JSOC Joint Operations. Fiona's voice softened slightly. And Chief Petty Officer Caleb's wife. The silence that followed was absolute. Silas looked from the tablet to the dogs, to the window, where he had last seen Amber, Whisper, disappear. Everything suddenly made terrible, perfect sense. The way she moved, the way the dogs reacted to her, the way she had endured 3 months of degradation and dismissal without a single word of complaint. She's been here the whole time, he breathed, watching, waiting. 3 months, Fiona confirmed, ever since Caleb's mission went wrong. She requested personal leave from her unit, fabricated a civilian identity, and inserted herself into this facility without any of us knowing. She paused, and for the first time something like pain crossed her face. She wasn't just mourning her husband, Senior Chief. She was investigating his death. Investigating? The official report said he was killed in action. The official report is a convenient fiction. Fiona moved to the casket, standing at the edge of the dog's perimeter. Phantom watched her, but didn't growl. Caleb wasn't killed by enemy combatants. He was executed. Someone in his own unit put a bullet in his head while he was sleeping. Silas felt the blood drain from his face. Friendly fire? Murder. And Whisper knows it. That's why she's here. That's why she took a job mopping floors and cleaning toilets, so she could watch everyone who had access to Caleb's mission files, so she could figure out who betrayed him and why. Does she have any leads? Fiona's expression hardened. Get her. Bring her here. It's time we stopped pretending and started talking. Silas moved toward the door, then paused. Admiral, how do I convince her to come? If she's been hiding her identity for 3 months, she's not going to trust. Tell her Phantom is waiting. Fiona's voice carried a weight of certainty. Tell her it's time to come home. Silas found Amber in the storage closet behind the mess hall, organizing cleaning supplies with the mechanical precision of someone whose mind was very far away. She didn't look up when he entered, but he noticed the subtle shift in her posture, the slight tensing of muscles, the repositioning of feet for optimal balance, ready to fight or flee at a moment's notice. Phantom is waiting, he said quietly, her hands stilled on the bottle she was holding. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she turned to face him. The mask was gone. The submissive janitor with downcast eyes had vanished, replaced by something far more dangerous. Her gaze was sharp, assessing, calculating threat levels and escape routes with the speed of a combat veteran. "Who told you?" Her voice was different now, lower, steadier, carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "Admiral Fiona, she's waiting for you in the kennel building." Amber, whisper, studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once and set down her supplies. "The dogs, they haven't moved?" "Not an inch. They've been waiting for you since the casket arrived." Something flickered across her face. Pain, maybe, or a grief so deep it had no proper name. Then the mask slid back into place, and she strode past him toward the door. "Then let's not keep them waiting any longer." They walked in silence across the compound, drawing curious glances from personnel who had never given the quiet janitor a second look. Now, something had changed. The woman who walked beside Senior Chief Silas moved with a predator's grace, her eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, every potential threat. By the time they reached the kennel building, a small crowd had gathered outside, word spreading through the base that something significant was about to happen. Brick stood near the entrance, his expression caught between suspicion and confusion. "Silas, what's going on? Why is she—" "Stand aside, Master Chief." Silas's voice carried an authority that made Brick step back instinctively. "Admiral's orders." They entered the building together. Fiona stood near the casket, waiting. Dr. Hazel remained in her corner, watching with barely contained curiosity. And the dogs? The dogs came alive. Phantom was the first to move, his head snapped up, ears pricking forward, tail beginning a slow, uncertain wag. Then Luna, then Reaper. One by one, like a chain reaction, every dog in the circle turned to face the woman who had just entered. Amber stopped walking. For a moment, nothing happened. 12 dogs stared at her. She stared back at them. The silence stretched until it seemed the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then Phantom stood up. He walked toward her slowly, deliberately, his massive body moving with a grace that belied his size. When he reached her, he sat at her feet and looked up, not with the blank obedience of a trained animal, but with something far more profound. Recognition, devotion, love. Amber dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around his neck. Her shoulders shook. No sound came from her, but the trembling of her body spoke volumes. Behind Phantom, the other dogs rose from their vigil. One by one, they approached her, Luna pressing against her side, Reaper laying his scarred head in her lap, Odin standing guard behind her like a furry mountain. Storm, thunder, blaze, shadow, ghost, titan, atlas, valor, each found their place in the cluster of bodies that surrounded her. They had been waiting for her. All along, they had been waiting for her. Brick watched from the doorway, his face a mask of shock. All morning, he had dismissed her as an annoyance, a civilian who couldn't follow simple orders. He had threatened her, mocked her, treated her like something beneath his notice. And all along, she had been— "Who is she?" he breathed. Admiral Fiona turned to face him, and for the first time since arriving, she allowed a small, sad smile to cross her feet. "She's the reason those dogs are the best in the world, Master Chief. She trained every single one of them from the day they were born." The Admiral paused, letting the weight of her next words sink in. "And she's Chief Petty Officer Caleb's wife." The color drained from Brick's face. "His wife?" Codename Whisper, Senior Handler, Ghost Unit 7. One of the most decorated operatives in a unit that technically doesn't exist. Fiona watched as the dogs crowded around their true master. "She's been working as your janitor for 3 months, and none of you had any idea." In the center of the room, Amber finally lifted her head. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "They wouldn't leave him," she said softly, addressing no one in particular. "They knew I would come. They knew I would need to say goodbye." Her hand stroked the Phantom's head absently. "Caleb trained them to protect what matters most, and to them, I was what mattered most. So, they waited." Silas stepped forward, his voice gentle. "Whisper, Amber, we need to talk about what happened in Syria." "I know." She rose to her feet, the dogs adjusting their positions around her like a living shield. "I know who killed him. I've known for 2 weeks." The silence that followed was deafening. Fiona stepped closer, her eyes sharp. "Who?" Before Amber could answer, the door burst open and Derek rushed in, slightly out of breath. "Admiral, I apologize for the interruption, but Command needs to speak with you urgently about—" He stopped mid-sentence, His eyes had found Amber, standing in the center of the room, surrounded by dogs that had spent all morning refusing every command he and the others had given. Dogs that now watched him with an intensity that made his blood run cold. Phantom growled. It was a low sound, almost subsonic, but it carried a promise of violence that filled the room like smoke. Beside him, Reaper rose to his feet, lips pulling back from teeth that had torn through enemy combatants. Derek took a step backward, his face paling. What's happening? Why are they looking at me like that? Amber's voice was ice. Because they know, Specialist. They've always known. Known what? I don't understand. You were the last person to see Caleb alive. She moved toward him, and the dogs moved with her, a wave of fur and muscle and barely contained fury. You were supposed to be on watch that night. You were supposed to have his back. I did. There was an attack. There was no attack. Amber's voice dropped to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than any shout. The base logs show no enemy contact that night. The security feeds show you leaving Caleb's quarters at 02:17, exactly 43 minutes before his body was discovered. She stopped barely a foot away from him, her eyes boring into his. And the ballistics report that was supposed to be classified? The bullet that killed my husband came from an American weapon. Your weapon. Derek's face contorted, first in denial, then in something far uglier. You can't prove that. The ballistics report was destroyed. I retrieved a copy from the evidence locker in Langley before it was destroyed. Amber's hand dipped into her pocket and produced a small flash drive. Along with the communication logs showing your correspondence with a contact you referred to only as Handler. 12 messages over 4 months, detailed mission reports, intelligence on Caleb's activities, and a final confirmation received the day before he died. Asset compromised, eliminate. The room had gone completely still. Derek's eyes darted around, looking for escape routes that didn't exist. Silas had moved to block the door. Brick, despite his earlier animosity toward Amber, had positioned himself to cut off any exit through the windows. Even Dr. Hazel had risen from her corner, her kind eyes now hard with understanding. You're insane, Derek snarled, dropping all pretense. You have no authority here. You're just a janitor. I'm the woman whose husband you murdered. Amber stepped even closer, and Phantom matched her movement, his growl intensifying. I'm the handler who trained every dog in this room to recognize threats. And right now, Specialist, you are the biggest threat in their world. Derek's hand moved toward his sidearm. He never made it. Reaper was faster. The dog hit him like a missile, 100 pounds of trained fury driving him to the ground before his fingers could even touch his weapon. But Reaper didn't bite. He simply pinned, holding Derek immobile with the controlled precision of a dog who had been trained to capture, not kill. Good boy, Amber said softly. Silas moved in, securing Derek's weapon and restraining his hands with professional efficiency. Specialist Derek, you are being detained pending investigation for the murder of Chief Petty Officer Caleb and suspected espionage against the United States military. You can't do this. Derek struggled against his restraints. You don't understand. There are people above me, people you can't touch. Caleb found something he shouldn't have found, and they... Save it for the interrogation. Admiral Fiona's voice cut through his protests like a knife. Commander Cyrus! The door opened, and Cyrus appeared, flanked by 2 military police officers. His face showed shock at the scene before him. Derek on the ground, held in place by a dog and a pair of senior enlisted, while a woman he had known only as a janitor stood at the center of it all. Admiral, take Specialist Derek into custody. Maximum security protocols. No contact with anyone until I personally authorize it. Yes, ma'am. Cyrus gestured to the MPs, who hauled Derek to his feet and began escorting him toward the door. As he passed Amber, Derek turned his head and spat one final venomous statement. You think this is over? You think arresting me changes anything? Caleb was getting too close to something huge, something that goes all the way to the top. They'll never let the truth come out, and they'll never let you live to tell it. Reaper snarled, and the MPs quickened their pace, practically dragging Derek through the door before the dog could follow through on his obvious intent. Silence returned to the room. Amber stood motionless, surrounded by her dogs, staring at the door through which her husband's killer had just disappeared. Her face showed nothing, no triumph, no relief, no satisfaction, only the hollow emptiness of a grief that would never fully heal. Fiona approached her carefully, Whisper, my name is Amber. Her voice was quiet but firm. I'm not Whisper anymore. I'm not an operative. I'm just a woman who lost her husband and spent 3 months pretending to be invisible so I could find out why. You could have come to us. You could have trusted the system. The system had Derek in it. Amber finally turned to face the Admiral, and the weight of 3 months of isolation and deception showed in her eyes. The system let my husband's killer walk free while I mopped floors 10 feet away from the evidence locker. The system would have buried this just like it buried everything else Caleb discovered. Fiona had no response to that. Brick stepped forward hesitantly, his earlier arrogance replaced by something approaching shame. Ma'am, Amber, I owe you an apology. The way I treated you, you treated me exactly the way I needed to be treated, Master Chief. Amber's voice held no bitterness. I needed to be invisible. I needed to be dismissed. If you had treated me with respect, someone might have started asking questions about why the janitor was getting special treatment. Fletcher emerged from the corner where he had been standing frozen since the confrontation began. You trained all of them, every dog in this room, from the day they opened their eyes. For the first time, something like warmth entered Amber's voice. Caleb and I built this program together. He was the front man, the face that attended briefings and received medals. I was the shadow, the one who did the work no one was supposed to know about. That's why they wouldn't listen to me, Fletcher realized. They were never trained to respond to standard commands. They respond to commands in 7 languages, none of them English. Amber allowed herself a small, sad smile. We trained them to be impossible to capture, impossible to turn. Even if an enemy learned their commands, the accent would be wrong, the phrasing would be wrong. They would know the difference. Dr. Hazel stepped forward, professional curiosity overcoming her shock. The bond I observed, it's not just training, is it? It's something deeper. Caleb believed that dogs could sense things humans couldn't. Intent, emotion, truth. Amber's hand found Phantom's head again, stroking absently. We spent years developing techniques that went beyond obedience. Techniques that built genuine connection. These dogs don't just follow orders. They understand context. They make decisions. They know who belongs and who doesn't. That's why they growled at Derek, Silas murmured. Even before you arrived, they knew something was wrong with him. They've known from the beginning. Dogs can smell deception. They can read micro-expressions humans don't even know they're making. Derek has been walking past these kennels for 18 months, and every single time, they've reacted to him with suspicion. Amber's voice hardened. I should have listened to them from the start. What you just witnessed is something that will stay with you. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and share. Every interaction helps veterans' stories reach more people. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. We have an incredible story coming next week that will blow your mind. Stay tuned until the very end. There's one more twist coming. Admiral Fiona moved to stand beside the casket, looking down at the flag-draped box that contained what remained of Chief Petty Officer Caleb. The memorial service was supposed to begin an hour ago. The media is waiting. The families are waiting. We can't keep them in limbo forever. Amber nodded slowly. I know. She turned to face the casket, and for the first time since entering the room, allowed herself to truly look at it. I've been avoiding this moment for 3 months. Finding Derek was easier than facing the fact that Caleb is really gone. She walked to the casket, the dogs parting before her like water. When she reached it, she placed both hands on the flag and closed her eyes. I met him when we were both in training, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He was the worst handler in the class. Couldn't get a single dog to obey him. The instructors were about to wash him out. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. I found him behind the kennels one night, sitting in the dirt, talking to a puppy that had been rejected by its mother. Not giving commands, just talking, telling it about his childhood, his dreams, his fears, and the puppy was listening. Silas felt his throat tighten. That's when I knew he was special. Anyone can learn commands. Anyone can learn techniques. But Caleb understood something fundamental, that dogs don't serve because they're trained to. They serve because they choose to, because they trust, because they love. Her voice caught. He taught me that. He taught them that, and now he's gone. She stood in silence for a long moment, her hands still resting on the flag. The dogs had formed a loose circle around her, and the casket, no longer guarding against intruders, but simply present, sharing the moment, saying goodbye in their own wordless way. Finally, Amber opened her eyes. "It's time to let him go," she said, not to the humans in the room, but to the dogs. She spoke in a language none of the observers recognized, a lilting combination of syllables that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to something deeper. Phantom was the first to move. The big Malinois rose from his position, walked slowly to the casket, and pressed his nose against the flag. He held that position for several heartbeats, his eyes closed, his breathing slow and steady. Then he stepped back, lifted his head, and released a single mournful howl. One by one, the other dogs followed. Luna, smallest and youngest, approached with hesitant steps and licked the edge of the flag before retreating. Reaper, the scarred warrior, stood at rigid attention like a soldier on parade before dipping his head in something that looked remarkably like a bow. Odin, the gentle giant, pressed his entire massive body against the casket for a long moment before stepping back with a low whine. Each dog said goodbye in their own way. Each dog released their claim on the man who had raised them, trained them, loved them, and then it was over. The circle dissolved. The vigil ended. 12 dogs who had refused to move for nearly 24 hours quietly padded to the sides of the room, leaving clear access to the casket for the first time since it had arrived. Brick wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. Fletcher had turned away entirely, shoulders shaking. Even Admiral Fiona, who had commanded fleets and faced down enemies of the state, blinked rapidly against the moisture gathering in her vision. Silas stepped forward and placed a hand on Amber's shoulder. "The memorial can proceed now, but only if you're ready." Amber looked at the casket, then at the dogs, then at the men and women who had witnessed something they would never fully understand. Caleb would have wanted full honors. He earned them. He died serving his country, even if the enemy wore the same uniform. He'll have them. Fiona straightened, the Admiral reasserting herself over the woman who had been moved to tears moments before. "And so will you. When this is over, we need to talk about what happens next." "I know what happens next." Amber's voice had regained its edge. "Derek was just a pawn. Someone gave him orders. Someone with access to classified mission details and the authority to label Caleb as a threat." She pulled the flash drive from her pocket. "This contains everything I've gathered over the past 3 months. Names, dates, communications. Caleb was investigating a network, a shadow operation that's been selling intelligence to foreign actors. He got too close, and they eliminated him." Fiona took the drive carefully. "How deep does it go?" "Deep enough that Derek knew he was expendable. Deep enough that they had surveillance on this facility within hours of my arrival." Amber paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Deep enough that there's a photograph in Caleb's final report of someone in that network, someone wearing stars on their shoulders." The temperature in the room seemed to drop by 10 degrees. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying Caleb died trying to expose corruption at the highest levels of military intelligence. And I'm saying I'm not going to stop until everyone responsible pays for what they did." Fiona held her gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. "We'll discuss this after the memorial. For now, you have a husband to bury and a legacy to honor." She turned and walked to the door, pausing only to address the room at large. "This facility is now under lockdown. No communications in or out until further notice. Anyone with questions can direct them to me personally." Her eyes found Brick. "Master Chief, ensure the memorial preparations are complete. We proceed in 1 hour." "Yes, ma'am." The door closed behind her, and the room began to empty. Dr. Hazel gathered her supplies. Fletcher slipped out without making eye contact with anyone. Silas remained near Amber, a silent presence offering support without intrusion. Only Brick lingered, clearly wrestling with something he needed to say. "Amber," he stopped, started again. "I spent all morning treating you like you were in the way, like you were less than nothing, and the whole time I was someone trying not to be seen." Amber met his eyes without accusation. "You saw exactly what I wanted you to see, Master Chief. A harmless civilian who didn't know her place. It kept me safe. It kept my investigation secret." She paused. "It kept me from falling apart every time I walked past the kennels and heard dogs that used to greet me every morning." Brick swallowed hard. "For what it's worth. What you've done. Staying here for 3 months, enduring everything. That takes a kind of strength most people can't even imagine. Caleb would have been proud." For the first time, Amber's careful composure cracked. Her eyes glistened, and she had to look away before the tears could fall. "Thank you, Master Chief. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for my husband's funeral." She walked toward the door, Phantom falling into step beside her without being asked. The other dogs watched her go, but didn't follow, an unspoken understanding that their vigil was complete and their master's wife needed time alone. At the threshold, she paused and turned back. "Master Chief?" "Yes?" "After the memorial, after the investigation, after all of this is over." She looked at the kennels where the remaining dogs had gathered, pressed against the bars to watch her leave. "Take care of them. They're the best soldiers you'll ever command." Before he could respond, she was gone. Silas moved to stand beside Brick, both men staring at the empty doorway. That woman just solved a murder that an entire military intelligence apparatus tried to bury, and she did it while mopping floors and taking orders from people who didn't know she existed. Brick shook his head slowly. "I've met generals with less steel in their spines." "Those dogs knew," Silas said quietly. "The whole time they knew who she was and what she was doing. That's why they guarded the casket. They weren't just protecting Caleb, they were keeping watch until she was ready." "Ready for what?" Silas turned to look at him with eyes that held decades of hard-won wisdom. "Ready to say goodbye, ready to stop pretending, ready to become Whisper one more time and finish what her husband started." The memorial service began at 1400 hours, 1 hour later than scheduled. The delay was attributed to logistical complications, and no one outside the immediate command structure would ever know the real reason. Amber stood at the front of the assembled crowd, wearing a black dress she had retrieved from a storage locker off base, her real clothes, kept hidden for this exact moment. At her side, Phantom sat in perfect stillness, his leash held loosely in her hand. The other 11 dogs were positioned throughout the ceremony area, each handled by a member of the K9 unit who had volunteered when word spread about what had happened in the kennel building. They stood at attention like furry honor guards, their eyes never straying from the flag-draped casket at the center of the proceedings. Admiral Fiona delivered the eulogy personally. She spoke of Caleb's service, his dedication, his sacrifice. She spoke of the dogs he had trained and the lives they had saved. She did not speak of the investigation that was already unfolding in secure facilities throughout Virginia, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. Some truths were for another time. When the folded flag was presented, it was Fiona who placed it in Amber's hands. The Admiral's eyes met hers with an understanding that needed no words. "This isn't over. We'll find them all." The rifles fired their salute. The bugle played its mournful call. And somewhere in a holding cell beneath the base, Specialist Derek listened to the distant sounds of honor being paid to the man he had murdered. As the crowd dispersed and the casket was prepared for transport to its final resting place, Silas found Amber standing alone at the edge of the cemetery. Phantom remained at her side, his dark eyes watchful, even in this moment of quiet grief. "He's the one who taught me about loyalty," she said without turning around. "Not the word, the real thing. The kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. The kind that stays even when it hurts." She looked down at Phantom. "That's why I could never have trained these dogs without him. He showed me what true devotion looked like." Silas stood in respectful silence, understanding that she needed to speak more than she needed comfort. "I was already a handler when we met, good at my job, efficient, professional." She shook her head. "But I was missing something, the connection, the thing that turns obedience into trust. Caleb showed me how to find it, not by demanding more, but by giving more, by being worthy of the loyalty I was asking for. He sounds like an exceptional man. He was. And now I have to find the people who took him from me." Amber turned to face him, and the vulnerable widow of moments ago had been replaced by something harder, something dangerous. Derek was receiving orders from someone with significant operational authority, someone who could access mission planning, reassign personnel, and bury evidence. That's not a lone actor. That's a network. The Admiral is already working on it. The flash drive you provided contains only part of the picture. Amber reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a small notebook, leather-bound, worn from use. "This is the rest. Caleb's personal notes, names he didn't want in any electronic system, observations he made about personnel he suspected. A timeline of intelligence leaks that he traced back to their source." Silas took the notebook carefully. "Why didn't you give this to the Admiral with the rest?" "Because Caleb believed the corruption went higher than anyone wanted to admit. And until I know exactly how high, I don't know who I can trust." She paused, considering her next words. I trust you, Senior Chief. Caleb trusted you. That's why I'm giving you that notebook instead of putting it in official channels. What do you want me to do with it? Amber looked toward the distant horizon, where the sun was beginning its slow descent toward evening. Keep it safe. Study it. And when the time comes, when we know who's really behind all of this, use it to burn them to the ground. Before Silas could respond, her phone buzzed. She checked the screen, and something in her expression shifted. I have to go, she said abruptly. There's something I need to handle. Amber, look after the dogs, Senior Chief. They trust you now, and they'll need someone while I'm gone. She turned and walked away, Phantom breaking into a smooth trot beside her. Silas watched her go, the notebook heavy in his hands, questions multiplying faster than answers. What had that message said? Where was she going? And what was waiting for her when she got there? The message on Amber's phone contained only 3 words and a location. Langley knows, Warehouse 7. She recognized the sender's code, a contact from her days in Ghost Unit, someone who had been feeding her information since Caleb's death, someone who believed, as she did, that the truth was worth more than career survival. The warehouse district on the outskirts of Norfolk was quiet at this hour, most workers having gone home for the evening. Amber parked her rental car, a nondescript gray sedan she had acquired specifically for moments like this, behind a rusted shipping container and killed the engine. Phantom sat in the passenger seat, alert and watchful. Stay, she murmured, and the dog settled into position, understanding without further instruction that he was to guard the vehicle and wait for her return. Warehouse 7 loomed ahead, its corrugated metal walls streaked with years of salt air and neglect. The door hung slightly ajar, a thin line of light visible through the gap. Amber approached in silence, every sense heightened by years of training. She checked corners, listened for breathing, scanned for the telltale signs of an ambush. Nothing. She pushed through the door and found herself in a cavernous space filled with abandoned shipping crates and the musty smell of disuse. In the center, illuminated by a single overhead light, stood Senior Chief Silas. He wasn't alone. Beneath him, handcuffed to a metal chair, sat a man Amber had never seen before. He was middle-aged, soft around the edges, with the pale complexion of someone who spent their days behind a desk rather than in the field. His suit was expensive but disheveled, his tie loosened, his hair matted with sweat. Who is this? Amber asked, her voice flat. Someone who wanted to make a deal. Silas stepped aside, revealing more of the man's face. His name is Vincent. He's a civilian contractor, works for a consulting firm that handles logistics for intelligence operations. He came to me about an hour after the memorial ended, said he had information about Operation Phantom Leash. The name hit Amber like a physical blow. Caleb had mentioned it once, in a coded message sent 3 days before his death, a warning wrapped in military jargon that she had spent months trying to decipher. Start talking, she said, moving closer to Vincent. The man's eyes darted between her and Silas, calculating his options. Whatever he saw convinced him that cooperation was his only path forward. I'm just a middleman, he began, his voice trembling slightly. I don't make decisions. I just facilitate, move money, arrange meetings, handle the paperwork that can't go through official channels. Paperwork for what? Intelligence transfers, the kind that never get reported to oversight committees. Vincent swallowed hard. There's a group. I don't know everyone involved, nobody does, but they've been operating inside the military intelligence community for at least a decade. They identify valuable assets, compromise them, and sell the information to the highest bidder. And Caleb discovered them. It wasn't a question, but Vincent nodded anyway. Your husband was investigating a series of intelligence leaks in the Syria theater. Small stuff at first, patrol schedules, supply routes. But he started connecting dots that nobody was supposed to connect. He traced the leaks back to a specific communication channel, and that channel led him to what? Vincent's face went even paler. To someone inside JSOC, someone with stars on their shoulders. The warehouse fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the soft creak of metal settling in the evening air. Give me a name, Amber said quietly. I don't have a name. I swear to God I don't. Vincent's voice cracked with desperation. The people I work for, they compartmentalize everything. I only know my piece of the puzzle, but I know someone who might have the full picture, someone who's been trying to burn the whole thing down from the inside. Who? A woman. Works at Langley, Analyst designation, but she's been building a case for years, collecting evidence, waiting for the right moment to bring it all public. Vincent leaned forward, straining against his restraints. Her name is Clover. She reached out to me last week, said she knew about Caleb, knew about you, said if you wanted to finish what your husband started, she could help. Amber exchanged a glance with Silas. The name meant nothing to her, but that didn't mean much. The intelligence community was vast, and Ghost Unit operated in its own isolated sphere. How do I contact her? You don't. She contacts you. Vincent's eyes flickered toward the warehouse door. She said if I gave you this meeting, she would find a way to reach out, but it has to be on her terms. She's been hiding from these people longer than you've been hunting them. Before Amber could press for more details, her phone buzzed again. A different number this time. Blocked. Untraceable. She answered without speaking. Whisper. The voice on the other end was female, calm, and carried the precise diction of someone trained to be understood clearly in any circumstance. I hear you've been looking for answers. I have some. But this isn't a conversation for phones or warehouses. Come to the address I'm sending you. Come alone, and come prepared to learn things that will change everything you think you know about your husband's death. The line went dead. A moment later, a text arrived with coordinates that Amber recognized, a secure location in rural Virginia, used by intelligence agencies for off-book meetings and the kind of conversations that never made it into official records. I have to go, she said. Silas stepped forward. Not alone. This could be a trap. It could also be my only chance to find out who really killed Caleb. Amber looked at Vincent, still bound to his chair. What do we do with him? I'll handle it. We have questions that need answers, and he's going to provide them. Silas's voice carried a steel that reminded Amber why Caleb had trusted him above almost everyone else. But Amber, be careful. Whoever these people are, they've already killed to protect their secrets. They won't hesitate to kill again. She nodded once, then turned and walked toward the door. Phantom would be waiting. The road ahead was dark and uncertain. But for the first time since Caleb's death, she felt like she was moving forward instead of just surviving. The drive took 3 hours. Amber pushed the sedan through winding back roads that grew increasingly isolated as she left the populated areas behind. The coordinates led to a farmhouse at the end of a gravel track, surrounded by fields that had long since gone fallow. No neighbors for miles, no witnesses for whatever was about to happen. Phantom had remained silent throughout the journey, his presence a comfort in the darkness. When she finally pulled up to the farmhouse and killed the engine, he turned to look at her with those intelligent eyes that seemed to understand far more than any dog should. Guard the car, she said softly. If I'm not back in 1 hour, go to Silas. The Malinois settled into position, his gaze never leaving her as she stepped out of the vehicle and approached the farmhouse door. It opened before she could knock. The woman standing in the doorway was younger than Amber had expected, mid-30s at most, with sharp features and the kind of watchful intensity that marked someone who had spent years looking over their shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore civilian clothes that did nothing to hide the tension in her frame. You came alone, Clover observed. Good, come in. The farmhouse interior was sparse but functional, a table covered in documents, multiple laptop computers displaying encrypted feeds, and a wall map marked with pins and connecting strings that formed a web of conspiracy spanning multiple continents. Amber took it all in with a single sweep of her eyes. You've been busy. For 7 years. Clover moved to the table and began organizing papers. That's how long I've known about Operation Phantom Leash. 7 years of collecting evidence, building connections, and watching good people die because they got too close to the truth. What is it? What is Phantom Leash? Clover paused, her hands stilling on a thick folder. It started as a legitimate intelligence operation, a program to embed assets in foreign military structures and extract information. Standard tradecraft, nothing unusual. But somewhere along the way, the people running it realized they were sitting on a gold mine. They started selling the intelligence to anyone who would pay. Russian oligarchs, Chinese state actors, Saudi princes, even some domestic buyers who wanted information on their competitors or enemies. Clover's voice was bitter. They built a shadow network inside our own intelligence community, and they've been operating with impunity for over a decade. Amber moved closer to the wall map, studying the connections. And Caleb found out. Your husband was one of the few people with both the clearance and the integrity to pose a real threat to them. His canine teams were being deployed to regions where Phantom Leash was most active, and he started noticing inconsistencies, missions that went wrong at suspicious times, targets that seemed to know they were coming, handlers who died under circumstances that didn't add up. He was investigating from the inside, Clover nodded. He contacted me about 6 months ago, after he traced a leak back to someone in his own chain of command. We started sharing information, building a case. He was supposed to deliver the final piece of evidence, the documentation that would identify the leadership of Phantom Leash on the day he died. Amber's heart clenched. He never made it. No, they got to him first. Clover pulled a photograph from her folder and placed it on the table. This is the last image captured by base security cameras before Caleb's death. Look at the timestamp. The photo showed a corridor and what appeared to be a forward operating base. Walking through the frame was a figure in military uniform, face partially obscured by shadow but unmistakably heading toward the quarters where Caleb had been killed. The timestamp read 0213, 4 minutes before Derek had been captured on camera, leaving Caleb's room. There were 2 of them, Amber breathed. Derek was the triggerman, but he had help, someone who disabled the security protocols, someone who made sure there would be no witnesses. Clover tapped to the photograph. Someone who outranked everyone else on that base by a considerable margin. Amber studied the figure in the image, trying to make out identifying features. The uniform was wrong for an enlisted soldier. Too many decorations, too much insignia. This was an officer, a senior officer. Who is it? I don't know yet. The image quality isn't good enough for facial recognition, and whoever it is has been very careful to stay out of official records. Clover pulled out another document. But I do know this, there's a meeting scheduled for tomorrow night. The leadership of Phantom Leash, gathering in one location to discuss damage control after Derek's arrest. Where? A private estate in Northern Virginia. Heavy security. Invitation only. Clover met her eyes. I can get you in, but once you're inside, you'll be on your own. If something goes wrong, there will be no extraction, no backup, no one to save you. Amber thought of Caleb, lying in his coffin, while 12 dogs refused to leave his side. She thought of the 3 months she had spent mopping floors and enduring contempt, all for this moment. She thought of the promise she had made at his grave, that she would find everyone responsible and make them answer for what they had done. Tell me what I need to know. The briefing lasted 3 hours. Clover walked her through everything. The layout of the estate, the security protocols, the identities of known attendees. She provided equipment, documentation, and a cover identity that would withstand casual scrutiny. By the time they finished, dawn was breaking over the Virginia hills, and Amber had a plan. One last thing, Clover handed her a small device, a recorder no larger than a button. Whatever you hear in there, whatever you see, document it. If something happens to you, this evidence needs to survive. Upload it to the secure server I showed you. It will auto-distribute to journalists, congressional oversight committees, and foreign intelligence services if the kill switch isn't reset every 24 hours. You've thought of everything. I've had 7 years. Clover's expression softened slightly. Caleb was a good man. He didn't deserve what happened to him. None of them did. Amber pocketed the recorder and moved toward the door. After tomorrow, there won't be any more secrets. One way or another, this ends. She drove back to Norfolk as the sun climbed higher, her mind racing through contingencies and variables. When she reached the base, she found Silas waiting outside the kennel building, with news that made her blood run cold. Derek's dead. The words hit her like a bullet. What? How? Found him in his cell this morning. Official cause of death is suicide. Hanged himself with his bedsheet. Silas's voice was grim. But the surveillance footage from his cell mysteriously malfunctioned during the relevant time window. No record of what actually happened. Amber felt the walls closing in. They're cleaning house. It gets worse. Admiral Fiona received orders this morning to shut down all investigation into Caleb's death. Classification upgraded to the highest level. Anyone who continues asking questions will be charged with breach of national security. For a moment, Amber felt the weight of everything crushing down on her. They had killed Derek to silence him. They had buried the investigation. They had resources and reach that extended far beyond what she had imagined. But then she thought of Clover's words, of the meeting tomorrow night, of the recorder in her pocket, and the evidence that could bring it all down. I need to see the dogs, she said. Silas led her to the kennels, where the 12 military working dogs were housed in individual runs. They came alive when she entered, pressing against the chain link barriers, tails wagging, voices raised in greeting. Phantom pushed through his gate. Someone had left it unlatched, perhaps anticipating her arrival, and came to her side immediately. The others whined and barked, desperate for her attention after a night apart. She spent an hour with them, walking through the kennels, greeting each dog individually, speaking to them in the languages only they understood. It was the first time in 3 months she had allowed herself this, the simple comfort of being with the animals she had raised and trained and loved. When she finally emerged, Silas was waiting. "Whatever you're planning," he said quietly, "you don't have to do it alone." "Yes, I do." Amber looked back at the kennels, where 12 pairs of eyes watched her through the chain link. "If I don't come back, take care of them. They're the only family I have left." She didn't give him a chance to argue. The estate was everything Clover had described, a sprawling property surrounded by forest, protected by professional security, and accessed only through a single gated entrance. Amber arrived as the sun was setting, dressed in the elegant attire of a wealthy donor's wife and carrying credentials that identified her as a member of a defense contractor's delegation. The guards checked her documentation, scanned her for weapons, and waved her through. Inside, the gathering was already in progress. Perhaps 50 people moved through the mansion's grand rooms, drinking champagne and making small talk that concealed the true nature of their business. Politicians, military officers, corporate executives, the faces of power, gathered to discuss the enterprise they had built on betrayal and blood. Amber circulated through the crowd, her recorder capturing fragments of conversation, names, dates, amounts, the casual vocabulary of treason, spoken by people who had long since stopped seeing it as wrong. And then she saw him. Standing near the fireplace, surrounded by admirers, was a man whose face she recognized from countless official photographs. 4 stars on his shoulders, a career built on public service and private corruption. The architect of Operation Phantom Leash, General Marcus Webb. Not Webb, she corrected herself, General Marcus Stone, but that wasn't what had frozen her in place. What had frozen her was the realization that General Stone was standing next to a photograph on the mantel, a photograph of himself with his arm around a younger man in military uniform. A younger man who looked exactly like Caleb. The room seemed to spin. Amber moved closer, desperate to get a better look at the photograph. The resemblance was unmistakable, the same jaw, the same eyes, the same slight crook in the nose that came from a break that had never healed quite right. "Beautiful, isn't he?" The voice came from behind her, and Amber turned to find General Stone himself standing barely 3 feet away. His smile was pleasant, his eyes were cold, and something in his expression suggested he knew exactly who she was. "My son," Stone continued, gesturing toward the photograph. "Lost him in Syria 3 months ago. Tragic accident. Line of duty." His smile never wavered. "You might have known him. You have the look of someone who's lost someone, too." Amber's mind raced through possibilities. Caleb had never mentioned family, never spoken of a father, let alone one who wore 4 stars. But the photograph didn't lie. "I'm sorry for your loss," she managed. "Are you?" Stone stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Because I'm told you've been asking questions about my son's death. Questions that make certain people very uncomfortable." The room around them continued its pleasant chatter, oblivious to the confrontation unfolding by the fireplace. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." Stone's hand closed around her elbow, gentle enough to appear casual, firm enough to prevent escape. "Let's take a walk, shall we? There are things we should discuss in private." He guided her through a side door and down a hallway lined with oil paintings and antique furniture. 2 security officers fell into step behind them, their presence making clear that refusal was not an option. They entered a study at the end of the hall, and the door clicked shut behind them. "You can drop the act," Stone said, releasing her arm. "I know who you are, Whisper. I've known since the day you started mopping floors at Little Creek." Amber's blood turned to ice. "You seem surprised. Did you really think you could operate in my territory without my knowledge?" Stone moved to a desk and poured himself a drink. I built the surveillance network you've been trying to avoid. I trained the analysts who flagged your fake identity. I authorized the cleanup of Specialist Derek before he could say anything inconvenient. You killed your own son." The words came out before she could stop them. Stone paused, glass halfway to his lips. Something flickered across his face. Not guilt, but something more complex. Regret, perhaps. or simply annoyance at having to address an unpleasant topic. Caleb was never supposed to be involved in any of this. I kept him separate, protected him, gave him assignments that would keep him far from phantom leash operations. He sipped his drink. But he was too good at his job, too dedicated. He started seeing patterns that he shouldn't have seen, asking questions that he shouldn't have asked. And by the time I realized how close he was getting, you had him killed. I gave the order to neutralize a security threat. Stone's voice was flat, clinical. The fact that the threat happened to share my DNA was unfortunate, but the operation couldn't be compromised. Too many people depend on it. Too much is at stake. Amber felt something breaking inside her, the last remnant of hope that there might be some explanation, some justification, some thread of humanity in the people who had taken Caleb from her. He trusted you. He loved you. He never knew about any of this. I made sure of that. In his mind, his father was a decorated war hero who devoted his life to serving his country. Stone set down his glass, which is exactly what I am, by the way. The money, the connections, the power, none of it is for personal gain. Everything I've built serves a higher purpose. What purpose could possibly justify survival? Stone cut her off. The survival of American interests in a world where our enemies are constantly finding new ways to undermine us. The intelligence we sell isn't random. It's carefully selected to destabilize threats, create conflicts between rival powers, and maintain the balance that keeps this country safe. You're a traitor. I'm a patriot who understands that the battlefield has changed. Stone moved toward her, and for the first time, something like genuine emotion entered his voice. You think the oversight committees, and the congressional hearings, and the journalists know what's really happening in the world? They're children playing at games they don't understand. People like me, we're the ones who actually keep the lights on. Amber's hand moved slowly toward the recorder in her pocket. She had enough. More than enough. If she could just get this evidence to Clover's secure server. Looking for this? Stone held up a small device, identical to the one Clover had given her, the one she had thought was safely hidden. We've known about Clover for years, allowed her to operate because she was useful. She flushed out other investigators, made them reveal themselves before they could become real threats. He crushed the recorder under his heel, just like she flushed you out. The door behind her opened, and 2 more security officers entered. Amber calculated the odds, 4 against 1, in an enclosed space with no weapons and no backup. Not good. I could kill you right now, Stone said conversationally. Make you disappear just like I made Derek disappear. No one would ever know what happened. No one would ever find the body. Then why haven't you? Stone smiled, and it was the most frightening expression she had ever seen. Because you're more useful alive. You have connections, knowledge, skills that I can use. And unlike my son, you've already proven that you understand how the real world works. You want me to join you. I want you to recognize reality. Caleb is dead. The investigation is dead. Everyone who might have helped you is either compromised or eliminated. You have nothing left. He spread his hands. Accept the opportunity I'm offering. Work for me, and you can have everything. Money, protection, purpose. Continue fighting, and you'll end up in an unmarked grave next to your husband. Amber looked at the man who had ordered Caleb's death. The father who had sacrificed his son for an operation built on treason. The general who saw himself as a patriot while selling secrets to the highest bidder, and she made her choice. I would rather die. Stone's smile faded. That can be arranged. He nodded to the security officers, who stepped forward with restraints ready, and then the window exploded inward. Glass sprayed across the room as a dark shape came through the opening, 100 pounds of trained fury, with fangs bared and a snarl that turned blood to ice. Phantom hit the first guard before anyone could react, driving him to the ground with enough force to crack ribs. The second guard reached for his weapon, but never completed the motion. Luna came through a different window, smaller but just as deadly, her teeth finding his wrist before he could draw. More sounds of breaking glass echoed through the mansion. Screams from other rooms, the thunderous bark of military working dogs doing what they had been trained to do. Amber didn't waste time wondering how they had found her. She moved. Her elbow caught Stone in the throat, staggering him. Her knee found his midsection, doubling him over, and her fist connected with his temple just as Reaper came through the door, having somehow gotten past the exterior security. Stone went down hard. Amber grabbed his phone from his pocket, hoping it contained something useful, and ran. The mansion had descended into chaos. Guests fled in all directions. Security officers tried to contain the situation, but found themselves facing an enemy they had never anticipated. 12 highly trained military working dogs operating as a coordinated pack, targeting threats with the precision of a surgical strike. Amber made it to the front door just as Silas appeared, running up the drive with a vehicle she recognized as military. "Get in!" he shouted. She didn't need to be told twice. Phantom and Luna broke off their attacks and sprinted toward the vehicle, leaping into the back with practiced grace. The other dogs followed, appearing from windows and doorways, converging on their extraction point with the discipline of soldiers completing a mission. Silas floored the accelerator before the last dog was fully inside, the vehicle tearing down the drive and through the gates before security could organize a response. "How?" Amber gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "Phantom!" Silas kept his eyes on the road, pushing the vehicle to dangerous speeds. "He tracked you, led the whole pack right to that estate like he knew exactly where you were. That's impossible. I was 50 miles away. Tell that to him." Silas jerked his thumb toward the back, where Phantom sat with his tongue lolling, looking absurdly pleased with himself. "Those dogs have always been special. Caleb always said they could find anyone, anywhere, if they cared enough to look." Amber turned to look at Phantom, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words, beyond training, beyond anything that could be explained by science or logic. He had come for her. They all had. Just like they had guarded Caleb's casket until she came to say goodbye. The drive back to Norfolk took 3 hours. By the time they reached the base, dawn was breaking for the second time in as many days, and Amber was running on fumes. But there was one more thing she needed to do. Stone's phone contained exactly what she had hoped, encrypted files that her ghost unit training allowed her to access. Communications, financial records, the names and photographs of every member of Operation Phantom Leash, including General Marcus Stone himself. She uploaded everything to Clover's server. Then she uploaded it to 3 different news organizations. Then she sent copies to congressional oversight committees, the Inspector General, and the Secretary of Defense's office. If Stone had taught her anything, it was that redundancy mattered. By noon, the story was breaking on every major network. By evening, arrests were being made across 3 continents. By the next morning, General Marcus Stone had been found dead in his study. The official cause listed as suicide, though the timing suggested that someone had decided to clean house one final time. Amber watched the coverage from the kennel building at Little Creek, surrounded by dogs who pressed against her legs and demanded attention. Silas stood nearby, fielding calls from agencies that suddenly had a lot of questions and very few answers. "It's over," he said finally, setting down his phone. "They're calling it the biggest intelligence scandal in American history. Stone's network is completely dismantled. Anyone connected to Phantom Leash is either in custody or running for their lives." Amber nodded slowly. "And Caleb?" "His file has been unsealed. His death is officially classified as murder by a foreign-influenced conspiracy. Full military honors are being arranged." Silas paused. "They want to give you a medal." "I don't want a medal." "I know. I told them that." He moved to stand beside her, looking out at the dogs. "What will you do now?" It was a question Amber had been avoiding. For 3 months, her entire existence had been focused on a single goal, finding the truth about Caleb's death. Now that the truth was exposed, now that justice had been served, she found herself adrift. "I don't know," she admitted. "I spent so long pretending to be someone else that I forgot how to be myself." Phantom pressed his nose against her hand, and she scratched behind his ears automatically. "You could stay," Silas offered. "The K9 program needs leadership, real leadership, from someone who understands what these dogs are capable of, someone who can train the next generation of handlers to be worthy of them." Amber considered it. The idea had appeal, a purpose, a place, a connection to the work that had defined her life alongside Caleb. But something else was calling to her, something she couldn't quite name. "There's still work to be done," she said slowly. "Stone's network is dismantled, but he wasn't working alone. There are other operations out there, other shadows that need exposing." Silas nodded, understanding without needing explanation. "And you're going to find them?" "Someone has to." Amber looked at Phantom, at Luna, at the whole pack that had risked everything to save her. "Caleb died trying to make the world a little less corrupt. The least I can do is continue what he started." She stayed for another week, long enough to ensure the dogs were properly situated, long enough to train the handlers who would care for them, long enough to say a proper goodbye. On her last night, she walked through the kennels one final time. Each dog received her attention, her affection, her whispered promise that she would return someday. When she reached Phantom's Run, she found the gate already open, Silas having anticipated what she couldn't bring herself to ask. "He's yours," Silas said from the doorway. "Always has been. Caleb would have wanted you to have him." Amber knelt beside the big Malinois, burying her face in his fur. "I can't take him where I'm going." "Then he'll wait, just like he waited before." Silas moved to close the gate behind her as she stepped out of the run. "Dogs like him, they don't give up on the people they love. However long it takes, he'll be here when you come back." She left at dawn, driving the same gray sedan that had carried her through so much already. The road stretched ahead, empty and uncertain, leading toward whatever came next. Her phone buzzed as she reached the highway. Unknown number, blocked caller ID. She answered. "Whisper." The voice was male, unfamiliar, and carried the weight of authority. "You've made quite a mess of things. Stone is dead. His network is destroyed. I'd call that cleaning up a mess, not making one. Stone was one operation among many. You've merely scratched the surface." A pause. "But you've also demonstrated capabilities that certain parties find impressive. There are people who would like to meet you, people who share your interest in exposing corruption and holding the powerful accountable. Who are you? Someone who believes that what you've started deserves to continue, someone who can provide resources, intelligence, and protection that you couldn't access alone." Amber glanced in the rearview mirror. A black SUV had appeared behind her, maintaining a steady distance, close enough to be noticed, far enough to suggest they weren't planning an immediate move. "The SUV behind me, yours? Consider it an escort, a demonstration of good faith." The voice carried something that might have been amusement. "You're valuable, Whisper. Too valuable to let wander the world unprotected. The question is whether you want to work with us or continue operating alone. And if I choose alone, then the escort will fall back, and you'll never hear from us again. But the offer will remain open. Whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, you know how to reach us." The line went dead. Amber drove in silence for several miles, watching the SUV in her mirror. It made no aggressive moves, maintained its respectful distance, and gave every indication of being exactly what the caller had described, an escort rather than a threat. Finally, she reached for the glove compartment and pulled out the file she had taken from Stone's estate. The words on the cover read, "Operation Phantom Leash, Classified." Inside were documents she hadn't yet had time to fully examine, references to other operations, other networks, other shadows that still lurked in the hidden corners of power. Tucked between the pages was a photograph. Caleb, smiling, his arm around a man whose face had been deliberately obscured. But Amber recognized the background, a location she knew, a place that held secrets yet to be uncovered. There was more work to be done. She pressed the accelerator, and the sedan surged forward into the uncertain dawn. Behind her, the black SUV followed, and somewhere in her heart, she heard Caleb's voice, gentle, loving, forever present, urging her onward. "Find them all," he seemed to say, "for both of us." The highway stretched ahead, endless and full of possibility. Amber drove into the light. This story reminds us that true strength never announces itself. Amber spent 3 months mopping floors, enduring mockery, and being treated as invisible, not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to wait. The most powerful people in any room are often the ones who feel no need to prove it. The loyalty of those 12 dogs teaches us something profound about devotion. They didn't guard Caleb's casket because they were trained to. They guarded it because they loved him. They waited not for commands, but for the one person who shared their grief. In a world obsessed with obedience, they showed us the difference between following orders and honoring bonds. Caleb died fighting corruption from within. Amber continued his mission not with armies or weapons, but with patience, intelligence, and unbreakable resolve. Their story proves that one person, armed with truth and determination, can bring down empires built on lies. The lesson is simple but powerful. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Never dismiss someone based on their uniform, their title, or their appearance. The janitor might be a legend. The grieving widow might be a warrior. The dogs who refuse to move might understand something you cannot. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible military stories. Drop a comment telling us which moment hit you the hardest. And remember, in a world that rewards the loudest voices, sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never say a word.